The year was 1990. NASA launched the Hubble Space Telescope. Driving Miss Daisy won Best Picture at the Academy Awards. The first McDonald's in the Soviet Union opened. And Nintendo released their newest home console, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, or Super Famicom in its native Japan. And with it, a little game called F-Zero. The 90s was a decade of promise, and it was also a decade of change. And F-Zero was the definition of change. F-Zero was a launch title for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, the follow-up to Nintendo's pioneering home console, the Nintendo Entertainment System. The Super Nintendo could do everything the normal Nintendo couldn't. It processed 16-bit graphics instead of 8-bit, it had a new, sleeker design, and it had an amazing library of games. I mean, you could play Super Mario World and Super Metroid on this thing. Who wouldn't want it? One of the Super Nintendo's most impressive features was a technology known as Mode 7. To put how it works in layman's terms, since I'm not a computer expert myself, instead of moving a figure around a static environment, Mode 7 takes that environment and moves it around the figure. This makes it possible to render graphics in a way that feels as close as possible to 3-dimensional on 2-dimensional hardware. Arguably, F-Zero made greater use of Mode 7 than any other game produced for the Super Nintendo, and this worked so well. F-Zero could render its graphics in a way that other racing games could only dream of, making it look and feel real, immediate, and tangible. F-Zero sold very well, ultimately racking up over 2 million units sold, and becoming one of the top 20 best-selling games for a system with a library of over 1,000 games. F-Zero set the standard for other racing games and established the subgenre of futuristic racing games. The story of F-Zero is set in the year 2560. Some billionaires have gotten a little bit bored, so they've created a new, dangerous form of entertainment that they can bet on and use to spice things up in their world. The F-Zero Grand Prix, inspired by the old Formula One races of the past. F-Zero was produced by Shigeru Miyamoto and directed by Kazunoubu Shimizu. Kazunoubu Shimizu has been with Nintendo since 1986, and he's done quite a few racing games for the company. The music was composed by Yumiko Kanki and Naoto Ishida, and what an incredible job they did. Every song from F-Zero is an instant classic, using synthesizers and driving drums to hammer out unique tunes. I couldn't find much information on Yumiko Kanki. The biggest titles she worked on were F-Zero and Star Fox 2, but she hasn't worked for Nintendo since at least 2006. There was also scarce info on Naoto Ishida. He worked on F-Zero and a few other games, but it doesn't look like he still works for Nintendo. One of F-Zero's major art designers was Takaya Imamura. It was the first title he worked on for Nintendo, and he was surprised at the creative freedom he was allowed, given his relative newness to the company. Takaya Imamura was a video game fan and artist who got a job at Nintendo in the 80s after impressing Shigeru Miyamoto in his interview. We have Takaya Imamura to thank for many of the designs and characters from F-Zero that we still love today. Imamura designed each of the 4 playable vehicles, which were initially supposed to have wheels, but they decided that hovering would look more futuristic, and saved them the trouble of animating spinning wheels. Believe it or not, Tim Burton's 1989 Batman film was an inspiration for the game, with producers citing its futuristic comic book style as a major influence. F-Zero was released with a comic book as part of its manual, which let players immerse themselves in the story of F-Zero and help give life and personality to the machines they were racing with, letting them get to know each vehicle's pilot. There are 4 machines that you can use. The Blue Falcon, piloted by heroic bounty hunter Captain Falcon, whose true identity is unknown. The Golden Fox, piloted by a charming surgeon, Dr. Stewart, who races to honor his father's memory. The Wild Goose, piloted by alien assassin Pico. And the Fire Stingray, piloted by small-time criminal and bounty hunter Samurai Goro, who has something of a rivalry with Captain Falcon. Each character and machine is unique. The machines have different stats, like differences in speed or handling, and you can use the one whose mechanics you like the best. F-Zero has 15 courses overall, spread across 3 leagues sorted by ascending difficulty: Knight, Queen, and King. The courses are all iconic, with Mute City and Big Blue being the standouts and reappearing in almost every F-Zero game to date. You compete against other racers for the win. It is a Grand Prix-style racing game, after all. You can accelerate, slide left or right with shoulder buttons, brake. After each lap, you earn 1 boost, which can give you a lead over your opponents if used correctly. You also have a health meter. If you crash into too many things, your ship will explode, and that's it, you're done. In subsequent games, your energy meter and your boost meter are linked, and this ups the risk factor, because every boost that you use takes a little bit of your energy and makes it easier for you to crash out. The inherent risk factor in F-Zero is one of the things that makes the game so challenging and fun to play. You actually have to think strategically, master tracks, and truly own your machine in order to win. Any one of your actions could be a mistake which costs you the win. If you've ever played a Mario Kart game, you're familiar with RNG, random number generation. This refers to randomly, algorithmically generated elements in a video game. In Mario Kart, this mostly takes the place of item boxes. Your win could hinge on what items you and your opponents get. With F-Zero, you have none of this. Your success is entirely based on your own skill. This means that the learning curve can be a little bit sharper for newer players, but once you get the hang of the mechanics, it's smooth sailing after that, and the gameplay is very rewarding. F-Zero sees the effort you put into learning the game, and it respects that. For many F-Zero fans, the original F-Zero is F-Zero. The pixel art, the track designs, the pilots and machines, that's F-Zero to them. And even if Nintendo had never made another F-Zero game, we still would have had an amazing game left to history. But lucky for us, Nintendo did make more F-Zero games, and the ones that come after it can honestly be even a little bit better than F-Zero. In 1998, Nintendo released the long-awaited sequel to F-Zero, F-Zero X. It's cooler because it has an X in it. The Nintendo 64 actually sold better in America than Japan, and still has quite a reputation to this day in the States. It had just released 2 years prior to F-Zero X, and this game made full use of the N64's console's power. F-Zero X boasted a crisp, smooth 60 frames per second, which allowed for high-octane, hardcore gameplay. The graphics weren't spectacular by any means, but it was the 90s, and also, are you really going to notice the graphics when you're barreling down dangerous roads at speeds in excess of 1,000 kilometers per hour? The soundtrack of the original F-Zero was groovy and great, but X's soundtrack was even better. Again, it was the 90s, and F-Zero X went for the cool factor with a shredding heavy metal soundtrack. This gave familiar tracks like Mute City and Big Blue a whole different and infinitely edgier vibe. F-Zero also expanded its pilot roster in X. Whereas the first game only had 4 characters to choose from, F-Zero X has 30, and each of them have their own unique designs and stories and machines. More humans, more aliens, more fun. I definitely have my favorites among the expanded roster. Jodie Summer, the Galactic Federation combat pilot, the Skull, a resurrected 200-year-old master pilot, Jack Levine, a dubiously Jewish former boy band member, Bio-Rex, who is literally just a fucking sentient dinosaur. Drac is a personal favorite, he's an alien F-Zero superfan, and I love him to death. Mighty Gazelle is a cybernetic powerhouse and the victim of a terrible Grand Prix accident, which made almost his whole body be turned into cybernetic parts. Each character and their machine is so distinct and unique, and it's so cool to be able to play a game with a pilot roster like this. Also, it's hilarious to me that they included a reference to Star Fox in here. You can race as James McCloud, who is literally just Fox's dad from Star Fox 64. F-Zero X has basically the same formula as the original F-Zero. The main changes are the soundtrack, the aesthetic, and the characters. The core gameplay is faster and a little crazier, but inherently the gameplay and objective are the same. 2 big changes are the linking of your energy meter with your boost capabilities, and the ability to use a spin attack to knock out opponents. That's right, in F-Zero X, Nintendo wants you to kill. And F-Zero X is fast. Stupid fast. Shigeru Miyamoto even said it's not possible to measure exactly how fast you can go in the game. Takaya Imamura returned as art director for F-Zero X, and got even more to do with X than with the original F-Zero. He went even deeper into the comic book art style for this game, and it works so well. Each character gets their own pilot profile, their own portrait. We've got descriptions and personality given to them. Each character really comes alive, and Imamura's art truly livens up the experience of gaming. Tracks like Big Blue, Mute City, Whiteland, and others make return appearances, but they're dialed up to 11 in this game, and they give you a handy 3-dimensional map for each track before it starts, so you can really see what hell you're getting yourself into. This time, the soundtrack was composed by Tarabando and Hajime Wakai. Tarabando still works for Nintendo, but he's mostly been a sound engineer. F-Zero X was a rare opportunity for him to flex his composer muscles and compose a whole soundtrack, and he did an amazing job. Hajime Wakai's first gig for Nintendo was Star Fox 64, and fresh off of that amazing synth orchestral feat, with a detour for Yoshi's story in between, he helped give us the heavy metal glory of F-Zero X. The director for X was Tadashi Sugiyama, a Nintendo veteran who has been with the company since 1983. Shigeru Miyamoto was the producer again. He produces lots of things, some of them better than others. F-Zero X sold over 1 million copies and became the 44th best-selling title for the Nintendo 64. Which is honestly not that bad when you consider that the Nintendo 64 wasn't a commercial powerhouse in the first place. It was competing with the PlayStation at the time. The PlayStation had a different library of games that I think appealed a little bit more to the zeitgeist of a lot of teenagers and people playing games at that time. The Nintendo 64 was still amazing, don't get me wrong, and lots of people, including me, remember it extremely fondly. It was actually the first gaming console that my family ever owned, but the PlayStation just sold better. X remains the second best-selling F-Zero title, and it's also frequently in the top 3 if you ask an F-Zero fan what their favorite games are. F-Zero X is definitely in my top 3. F-Zero really had a thing in the 90s, and its popularity really waned after that decade. This was before 9/11, before everyone in the West became more paranoid, before American teenagers decided to get more into shooting games than racing games, before Call of Duty was released, and games like that completely just reshaped the zeitgeist of gaming. In 2023, after 20 years without an F-Zero game, Nintendo released F-Zero 99 for the Nintendo Online members, and that game is really fun. So maybe Nintendo will see how fans appreciate F-Zero 99, and they'll make a proper new F-Zero game. It has been a long time without a proper installment, and I really think that Nintendo is missing out on the potential of this franchise. Who knows? Even if F-Zero never gets more games, even if we do just get remasters and ports, F-Zero still left behind an amazing legacy, and its games are some of the best in gaming history. Thanks for watching. If you stayed till the end, you're awesome. This is my first video, but I'll be making more like this one in the future. If you like this one and want to see more, maybe drop a like or subscribe. Leave me a comment if you just want to talk about how awesome F-Zero is, or if you have any feedback on this video, anything you think I could do better, anything you want to see in the next video. And I'll see you guys next time. Shalom.